Thor is by far one of the most powerful members of the Avengers. But that doesn't mean he's invincible. When it comes to superheroes, their careers and their powers, Thor seems to have it all. He's based on a Norse god, he's wielded any number of powerful weapons, most notably the magic hammer Mjolnir, he has immense strength, flight, cool lightning powers, and he even gets to be played by Chris Hemsworth in the movies. Truly, it's everything a superhero can hope for. But as much as the old God of Thunder loves a good brawl and has laid the smackdown on countless foes, be they gods themselves, mortal villains, trolls, or even other heroes, he doesn't always win whatever fight he gets his golden Viking locks into. There are heroes out there who have beaten him in a fight, so since I'm feeling a bit petty today, let's knock the Odinson off his perch for a moment and remind him of some of his defeats. Watching the God of Thunder duke it out with everyone's favorite green gamma giant is absolutely one of the highlights of being a Marvel fan. And I'm not just talking about their two awesome and memorable fights in the MCU either. Seriously, these two go at it so often in the comics that you could probably base an entire Tom and Jerry style cartoon around it. Thanks in part to Hulk's habit of being kind of randomly aggressive, they have fought countless times by now, and like most official hero versus hero fights, the plot will conspire to make sure there's no definitive winner, either because someone has to run away or they get interrupted before anyone can land a proper knockout. There have, however, been moments where Thor undeniably bit the dust, and one of the best ones happened in the one-shot comic Hulk Let the Battle Begin from 2010. In this story, the Jolly Green Giant gets into an all-out brawl against a group of common Marvel troublemakers called the Wrecking Crew, right until Thor arrives to pacify him, only to immediately end up on the wrong side of a beating that is equal parts amazing, hilarious, and downright embarrassing. Realizing that Mjolnir is a problem and that he himself can't lift it, Hulk proceeds to grab Thor by the wrist and beat the tar out of him with his own weapon in the most glorious case of why you hitting yourself ever depicted in serialized art. And it is beautiful. If you ever need a really good argument for why you want to play as a spellcaster at your next D&D game despite the fact that a strong breeze is likely to knock you out at level 1, look no further than the Sorcerer Supreme and just how much butt he can whoop. In particular, there was that one time in New Avengers Volume 2, Issue 34, where Strange ended up fighting a whole team's worth of Marvel's toughest fighters. Why? Because of a villain by the name of Daniel Drum, who blamed Dr. Strange for the death of his brother, Dr. Voodoo. And since there is no kill like overkill, Drum possessed a huge amount of heroes to rain down punishment on our favorite wizard. This includes the Red Hulk, Spider-Man, Iron Fist, Iron Man, Captain Marvel, The Thing, Daredevil, Hawkeye, Spider-Woman, and yep, our good old friend Thor. Not about to back down, Strange put up a fight and attempted to subdue the crowd one by one in a spectacular sequence where each fight was depicted in a unique art style. He didn't quite make it through the whole team before a heavily cartoonified Captain Marvel knocked him out, but he did take out Red Hulk, Spider-Man, The Thing, and Captain America before that happened. And yes, he got Thor too. Did I mention he wasn't even the Sorcerer Supreme at this time? Yeah, his performance in this fight earned him the title right back, and I certainly think it's well deserved. Strange may be the Sorcerer Supreme, but he's not the only high-powered spellcaster who has thrown down with Thor and served him his Blonde Asgardian backside on a platter. That is an honor he shares with Wanda Maximoff, better known as the Scarlet Witch. But I bet you're wondering why these two in particular would ever fight. Well, you can blame that one on the Red Skull. This particularly nasty supervillain once quite literally stole the recently killed Charles Xavier's brain for himself, somehow managing to get all of his incredible telepathic powers in the process. Red Skull being Red Skull, it took approximately 5 minutes for him to then unleash all kinds of hell on New York, which of course involved brainwashing Thor. Yeah, that's starting to seem like it's a whole thing for him. Fighting alongside Cyclops' brother Havoc, Wanda soon realized that they were not going to win in a straight fight. Not that she didn't try, considering she threw a truck at him. Instead, she opted to get creative with her magic and threw the Asgardian into the upper atmosphere just to get him out of her hair for a while. Hey, sometimes rowdy boys just need to be put in timeout for a bit, you know? When it comes to muscular Marvel heroes whose main power is hitting stuff really hard, The Thing is pretty much the OG. After all, it was the Fantastic Four that started the Marvel Universe as we know it today way back in 1961, and Ben Grimm's been handing out orange brick-flavored knuckle sandwiches like they were candy on Halloween ever since. He's not necessarily one of the absolute strongest heroes you can find in the Marvel Universe, but he has tangled with the other heavy hitters fairly regularly, including Thor. He even has the honor of once knocking out the Thunder God with one punch. It was under pretty bizarre circumstances too, considering it was back when Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, was apparently getting married to Dr. Doom. But don't worry, it was actually just Reed Richards inside of Doom's body. That makes it less weird, right? Right? Guys? To say the least, since the world was unaware of the whole mind swap situation, people were pretty bewildered by this engagement, and the Avengers approached Ben privately to see if they could get him to talk Sue out of this strange marriage. Refusing to back down, he ended up fighting the whole team at once, and absolutely wiped the floor with them. All it took was one good punch to the kisser, and Thor went flying straight into the Scarlet Witch, taking them both out on the spot and leaving Thing plenty of room to beat the rest of the team up off panel. Now, granted, no one was actually seriously trying to hurt anyone here, but still, lesson learned. Don't screw with the Thing. When comic books started clawing their way out of the restrictions of the Comics Code era and were allowed to adapt horror tropes once more, it didn't take long for Marvel to introduce a slew of spooky superheroes. And one of the most famous of these is no doubt the Ghost Rider. The Ghost Rider was originally a stunt biker named Johnny Blaze who made a deal with the devil to save his father from cancer, only to end up still losing him and becoming bonded with a spirit of vengeance named Zarathos, which turned him into the flaming skull-headed biker we know and love today. He's also immensely powerful, what with his strength and variety of demonic powers, and most heroes of the Marvel Universe are at least a little bit afraid of him, since he is an absolute nightmare to try and put down if he decides to fight you. Case in point, in Avengers 214, when Johnny Blaze was feeling especially down about his lot in life, Zarathos decided to go on a rampage. First, he just beat up Warren Worthington III, better known as the X-Man called Angel, but he soon found himself duking it out with the rest of the current Avengers team when they came to hunt him down for it. He took out Captain America and Tigra in a motorcycle race and shot a blast of hellfire through Iron Man's visor before our hammer-wielding hero finally showed up to join the fray. You'd think this would make for more of a fair fight, but nope! Ghost Rider not only outran Mjolnir, he managed to turn around, grab it in midair, and let it pull him back to Thor, effectively using it to throw his bike at his face, knocking him out on the spot and then making his getaway. Don't worry, they ganged up on him a bit later for a rematch, and a recovered Angel managed to talk him down, but still, Ghost Rider threw a burning motorcycle at Thor's face and rode off cackling all the way. I mean, how can you not love that? One of the strangest characters in Thor's supporting cast has got to be Beta Ray Bill, a weird alien horse thing wearing a similar costume and wielding a very similar weapon. You'd be forgiven for looking at this guy, reading his name and scratching your head at a first glance, but you don't want to underestimate old Bill here. He and Thor have thrown down several times, and he's certainly no stranger to coming out on top. To recap his origin, Beta Ray Bill is a Corbinite, one of the few survivors after the fire giant Surtur laid waste to the burning galaxies where Bill was born. Bill was chosen as his people's champion and rode off into space to find help, and when he ended up in S.H.I.E.L.D. airspace during an escape from more of Surtur's demons, Nick Fury sent Thor to investigate the mysterious spaceship. And as per comic book tradition, it almost took a whole minute before the two of them started beating the crap out of each other. At the time, one of Thor's weaknesses was that he would revert to his human identity of Donald Blake if he was separated from Mjolnir for more than a minute. So when Bill managed to make this happen and picked up Mjolnir for himself, he was found worthy and gained Thor's powers and costume, intending to use them to defend his people. When Odin caught wind of all this, his reaction was to make Thor and Bill fight for the right to wield Mjolnir in a fiery realm called Skardheim. Since he was more used to hot conditions like those in Skardheim, Bill managed to beat Thor again, but being the noble soul he actually was, he didn't finish him off. So instead of letting him claim Mjolnir, Odin ordered that a new weapon was to be forged, the Stormbreaker if you're curious, and rewarded Bill with the power to help his people. And ever since then, Thor and Bill have been allies. So yeah, in his very first appearance, Bill beat the snot out of Thor twice in a row and then became one of his best bros. Talk about making an entrance! It really should come as no surprise that, much like Thor and Hulk as mentioned earlier, one of Marvel's favorite hero-on-hero matchups is pitting Thor against Hercules, the son of Zeus. The two have fought each other lots of times, ever since Hercules refused to let Thor cross a bridge all Robin Hood style, although their fights usually end in a draw. Being based on the Greek hero of myth, Marvel's Hercules might actually be his universe's first superhero, chronologically speaking that is. He has millennia of combat expertise and shares many traits with Thor, both in terms of powers and personality. Although Herc has never really gotten over the whole boastful machismo and bravado thing the same way Thor has, thanks to Odin constantly insisting on giving his son lessons in humility. Hercules is a bit of an oaf sometimes, and he still has some, let's just call them outdated ideas about how a man should act. It was a combination of this and one of Odin's lessons that led to one time where Hercules claimed a truly decisive victory against Thor. See, Thor 126 is where the two had one of their biggest fights, and it all happened because Hercules was being a sleaze and started hitting on Jane Foster, which made Thor pretty mad. Man, it's always about a lady with knuckleheads like these two, isn't it? It turned into an absolutely epic brawl, but since Odin was angry at Thor for something else at the time, he chose that moment to hit him with a curse that took away half his power, causing him to grow weaker over the course of the fight. So it wasn't really a fair victory, but Herc doesn't actually know that, so we'll just let him have this one. The MCU's Inhumans series is widely considered one of the lowest points of the franchise as a whole, but that doesn't mean that the Inhumans themselves aren't a mainstay of the Marvel comics with long, rich history and many powerful characters among their ranks, such as their king, the Black Bolt. To brush up on the Inhumans a bit, they're a separate race from mutants and humans created millions of years ago when the Kree Empire visited Earth and experimented on primitive humans. The Kree abandoned the experiment and the Inhumans formed their own society away from humanity in their isolated city called Attilan. Much later, an Inhuman geneticist named Randak managed to shape the source of their power into the Terrigen Mists, which evolved Inhumans further when exposed to it, creating a variety of non-human mutations and giving Inhumans a seemingly random array of superpowers. Their king Black Bolt, for instance, has a voice so powerful that he can level an entire city just by speaking a single word, and thus he chooses to stay mute most of the time. But he did use this powerful voice of his to beat up Thor on one occasion, just not in the main Marvel universe. In one of Marvel's What If stories, Spider-Man was taken over fully by the Venom symbiote, and as you can imagine, this caused a lot of trouble. The symbiote started jumping to other heroes, first taking over the Hulk, who Thor managed to defeat, only to then get taken over himself. And that's when Black Bolt showed up. Now, remind me, what are Venom's weaknesses again? Fire and... oh, what was the second one? Sound? Oh yeah. Black Bolt screams indeed. Good show, Your Majesty. Moments like these are why you're the king. You'd be forgiven for having never heard of Wonder Man, considering he has never been more than a C-lister, but nonetheless, he can still count himself among the superheroes that have kicked the crap out of our favorite Asgardian blonde. In his first appearance, no less. But before we get into that, let's quickly cover who the heck this guy even is. At first, Wonder Man was simply a guy named Simon Williams who took over his father's munitions company and did a really lousy job of keeping it afloat. This was partly due to his own lack of experience and partly due to taking bad advice from his brother Eric Williams, who Marvel readers may know as a supervillain called Grim Reaper. Instead of owning up to this and admitting that he'd screwed up, Simon believed the whole thing was somehow Tony Stark's fault. So when Baron Zemo offered him superpowers in exchange for infiltrating the Avengers and acting as his double agent, he eagerly accepted. To make sure that Simon didn't betray him, Zemo made sure that his new superpowered body was dependent on a serum that only he could produce. And so Simon fought the Avengers despite having second thoughts about the whole thing. And he actually took down most of them with 1 or 2 hits each. I mean, say what you will about Zemo, the guy is undeniably horrible, but he sure knows how to give someone superpowers. He then managed to sucker punch Thor, sending him tumbling down a nearby pit and covered it with a boulder to keep him trapped. This wouldn't normally be a problem for Thor, but he'd conveniently dropped his hammer in the fight and thus turned back into Dr. Blake. Ultimately, Simon decided that his life was not worth killing the Avengers though. And so, Wonder Man turned on Zemo, freed Thor and the others, and helped them take down the bad guys. Only to then breathe his last in Iron Man's arms, simply being happy that his final act was a noble one. But psych, it was actually just a coma and Grim Reaper and Black Talon brought him back later. You gotta give Wonder Man some props though. Taking out Thor in your very first appearance is no small feat. Surprise! Nobody said we would only talk about Marvel heroes. That's right, at the top of the list of superheroes who have managed to take down the old hammer thrower, we find none other than the grandfather of modern superheroes himself, Superman. But how, you ask? Aren't they from different companies? Well, think about it for a second. In all of these years, did you really think DC and Marvel would never smell money at the idea of pitting their most powerful heroes against each other? There have been a number of DC and Marvel crossovers, most of them being single superhero team-ups, but 2 events in particular saw the 2 universes go toe-to-toe. First, there was DC vs. Marvel from 1996, where a pair of godlike brothers who each ruled one of the universes pitted them against each other to see which one was better. In this event, the outcomes of each fight were even determined by reader votes. Then there was JLA Avengers from 2003, where Krona, a renegade Owen from over at DC, met the Marvel character Grandmaster, and the 2 of them had the titular super teams duke it out. As the fight raged on and everyone else ended up on the floor, the final brawl came down to Superman and Thor. And to call this an epic fight would be an understatement. But in the end, Superman managed to make Thor eat dirt, claiming victory for the DC universe. Despite the fact that Thor has magic lightning powers, and magic has long been one of Superman's main weaknesses. Yeah, that little detail is something that makes fans debate how legit this fight was to this day. Still, of all the superheroes you could possibly face, there's no shame at all in losing to the big blue Boy Scout himself. Without him, we wouldn't even have any of the many characters we love so much today. And that includes Marvel's take on Thor. Just for the record, these aren't even all of them. Thor has been in so many scuffles with so many characters under so many conditions that there's plenty of other defeats to find in his long comic book history. So go right ahead and put a few of the ones we didn't bring up in the comments.